BMW r1150GS buying guide. You're probably going to buy the bike right now or pretty soon here, so we're not going to do fancy visuals. We're going to keep this intro short, and we're just going to talk about the issues straight up. Okay, let's get into it. Secondly, full disclosure, I'm not a professional motorcycle mechanic. I don't claim to be. I'm just a guy who dailies these bikes, has looked at a couple of them, and I like to think I know a lot about them as a result of that. First issue you want to check, final drive. So essentially what you're going to want to do is go to the back of this motorcycle, put it on the center stand, go to the back, and wiggle the rear wheel from side to side, right? You can do up and down, but side to side is generally the direction. What you're checking for is any play at all. There should be none. Now, getting into manufacturing history and talking about why this is a little complicated, and I can't be for sure this information is 100% accurate. But to my knowledge, the situation is that certain batches of the final drive bearings were faulty. They wouldn't fail immediately. You get 20 or 30 or so on 1,000 miles out of them, but they would eventually fail. These bearings were designed to be there for the lifetime of the bike. They were never supposed to be replaced. And certain batches of the bearings were very good, and they're still kicking. My bike has over 110,000 miles on it. It's on the original rear wheel bearing. It doesn't have any play. It's fine. So check that. It's a costly repair, over $1,000, if you can get parts, which they don't make the parts anymore. So it's difficult to get. The next thing you want to check is crash bars. This might not seem like an important one, but it's actually a really good way to gauge if the seller is honest and how the bike was ridden throughout its lifetime. So these are off-road bikes, but many of them, especially a lot of the examples left around, were never off-roaded. That is what you want. Bikes that are off-roaded are treated harder. You don't want an off-roaded example, ideally. But despite not being off-roaded, many of them still have off-road crash bars. So what you're going to want to do is go to the front of the bike, looking at the headlights, look at it front, dead on, and see if the crash bars are symmetrical and, appear to have never been knocked or pushed or bent, etc. Make sure they're symmetrical, make sure they're aligned, make sure they look how they're supposed to look, right? The second thing you can do is go to the underside of the crash bars and see if there's any scrapes or dents, etc. Now, what you're going to want to do is, in the negotiation process or the messaging process, whatever, ask the seller, has the bike ever been off-roaded? Has it ever been crashed? If it's never been crashed and it's never been off-roaded, the crash bars shouldn't be bent, misaligned, or in any way damaged. Now, if the bike was laid down, crashed, or it was dropped, it may be that one side of the crash bars is slightly bent, or one side is very scraped up. That would be a crash incident. But if it was off-roaded, the wear should be consistent. There should be scrapes and dents and things on both sides of the crash bars. It's not a perfect way to see if the bike was ever off-roaded and to see if the seller is being honest. Things can be replaced, etc. But it's actually a really good indicator. Third thing you want to look for, starter and battery issues. So the starter on these bikes is a pretty common problem. They don't fail every 5,000 miles or whatever, but they're a known problem that goes out. And lucky for you, it progressively goes out. It doesn't just stop like that. As they're going out, as they're getting to the end of their life, and I do mean end, very end, they will make a high-pitched whining noise, like a zzz, when you start the bike. And it will last just a couple of seconds and then stop. What this is the starter not being able to disengage from the engine. It's a sign that the starter is on its last legs. Now, there is one exception to this. And it could be that this exception is only true in the case that the electrical system is a little faulty and the starter is on its way out. I don't have a consensus. Obviously, this is a vintage bike, and I'm not a mechanic who's been working on them for 20 years. But as the starter goes out, it's going to make this noise, but it's exacerbated by a weak battery. And weak batteries are a really common problem with these bikes. I've had to replace my battery. I have weak battery issues. I've heard other owners complain of the same thing. I think the electrical system on this bike is just a little bit weak. So one great way to test that is when you start the bike, listen for the starter noise, but also see how quickly it turns over. These bikes are dogs. They don't like to start, especially when they're cold, and you'll want the bike to be cold when you start it. You want to hear a cold start on these bikes. Very important. And if it takes, 3, 4, 5 revolutions, and it's, as it's revolving, it's slow and labored sounding, that could definitely be an indication that the battery is weak and needs to be replaced. And unfortunately, you have to remove the tank to replace the batteries on these, or at least prop them up. However, before you start the bike, I recommend that you check your oil level. These bikes have a tremendously large oil sump for a motorcycle. Truly massive. And what that means is that they can run a lot more varying levels of oil than other bikes. Now, that doesn't mean it should run at these varying levels. It should be set at an ideal level, which is a little bit contentious, but it's somewhere around halfway at the sight glass when the bike is cold. I run a little bit less, but to each their own. And because it has such that large sump that it won't necessarily just brick the bike if the oil level gets too low, it is a common thing to see that these bikes are run with just way too little oil. They also burn oil. It's not a BMW thing. They're designed to burn oil slowly. It's in the actual design of the motorcycle. And you do need to top it up every couple thousand miles. But look at the sight glass. It's on the left side of the bike, right under the engine. It should be in the red circle around the sight glass. If it's not, there's a good chance the bike had been poorly maintained throughout its life. One easy thing to check also is to see if the transmission or the final drive, i.e. shaft drive, is leaking. Unfortunately, I'd love to show my bike to demonstrate where those are, but my bike is in the shop for a major repair right now. That's why I'm actually making this video. They're located, if you go on the right-hand side of the bike, they're located at the very back, at the rear wheel, underneath the kind of swing arm. There'll be a big bolt. It's not small, it's obvious. Big bolt. Feel around there. Feel around that bolt. See if you can get any oil on your hands. There's evidence of oil leaking. Same with the transmission. If you go on the transmission, it's that big cylindrical thing right before the swing arm. There's going to be a gigantic bolt right in the center. Two gigantic bolts, I should say. One on top, one below. That's kind of your fill and your drain. Look at the drain, the bottom bolt. It shouldn't have any evidence of leaking, etc. So on the later R1150s, they introduced a servo-assisted braking system. This system supposedly is quite loud. I wouldn't know because I don't ride one that has the servo-assisted brakes. Mine is an older model. But from what I've heard, they're quite loud, but they shouldn't be very noticeable while you're riding. You shouldn't, while you're riding, be having this screaming in your ears. If that's the case, that while you're actively riding, you can hear them. I would reckon to say there might be something wrong with the braking system, but no guarantees on that one. Like I said, I'm unfortunately not a mechanic, and I'm not familiar with the servo-assisted braking system because I don't got it. So at this point, you're probably going to start the bike. I mean, I know I'm doing this a little bit out of order. I probably should have done this in the order that you'll want to do while you're actually looking at the bike. But at this point in the video, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, let's get to starting conditions. Let's get to problems while the bike is running. Well, here's a problem that you do before the bike is running so the bike can run. These bikes, you want to let them heat up. They're a dog to start in the cold, so you want to hear a cold start. And also, they aren't carbureted, they're fuel injected, but they have a weird system. It's kind of archaic. It's an early fuel injection system. They need to heat up above the blue mark on the temperature gauge to really be ridden flat out. You can ride them before that. You just need to have the idle adjustment up. But you can ride them before that, but you don't want to just open it up. You know what I mean? So take that opportunity, get the bike started, go put your gear on. But to go put your gear on while the bike is running, you need to put it in neutral. And that's another common fault. The neutral sensor on these bikes breaks. You're being neutral and there's no neutral light. There's no neutral light ever because the sensor's broken. Pretty self-explanatory. Put it in neutral, see if the light comes on. Another thing you should check. These bikes have fuel quick connects. They have a plastic quick connector for their gas tank. These connectors can leak. I've seen them leak. So when you're starting the bike, let it run, let it run while you're putting your gear on. Look for fuel leaks. Look, at the bottom of the tank where the fuel lines would be, where it goes into the engine and everything, and just see if you find any fuel leaks at all. If you do, then I recommend you don't ride the bike. That's a fire hazard. Now, I'm putting that kind of lightly, but it shouldn't be taken lightly. I'm sure everyone kind of looks like Evel Knievel on a motorcycle, but I don't think people want to look that much like Evel Knievel in that their bike is actively on fire as they're riding it. Now, after you get the bike started, one thing you can do is turn off the bike, take off the engine oil cap. This should be very easy. Like, it just spins off. You don't need tools. Look at the oil on the cap and smell it. Now, it's very hard for me to describe what good oil smells like or bad oil smells like. So it kind of just needs to be a thing where if you're a mechanical person, you know. But it is something you can do to check on the oil. Now, the last things you can do to check on this bike are kind of just things that aren't really common issues. They're just individual things you can check that are easy. For example, one thing you can do is take the seats off. It's not hard. I got videos on it. And see if they go on and off smoothly. Sometimes they don't, and that could be a bargaining chip. You can also check things while the seats are off, like fuel lines, electrical. You can look at the fuse box. You can check to see if everything is in the toolbox, because these bikes do come with a toolbox. Just generally stuff like that, that's good to check. So I think I'm going to end this video with mods. I always kind of wanted to talk about the mods that are on. But the main reason I bring this up is because you can't get anything for these motorcycles. I have wanted crash bars on my bike for the longest time. And if you know any place that sells them, please put it in the comments. Because I've looked up and down, tons of private sellers. I've asked around. I've asked BMW directly. And to my knowledge, there is no place right now that sells a full off-road crash bar kit for this bike. There's one company that does engine protection. It's kind of just like a metal plate that goes over the engine, which could be good for drops and things, but it's not crash bars. And things like that, things like trunks, cases, crash bars, easy, simple modifications, but even pegs. Like, when I did a review of pivot peg, kind of a review, one of my older videos. When I got those, it was a kit specific to my motorcycle, and I was told that it was the last one for my motorcycle they have. They're not making no more. That was the last one in existence. So, basically, it's something to keep in mind. If you're going to buy these bikes and it doesn't have crash bars, it doesn't have engine protection, and you want that and you need that, you're not going to get it. So, be wary. So, I hope this helped you guys out, and I hope if you have the bike already and you just want to know about the common issues, this gives you some preventative maintenance you can do. So, bye.